I decided that my revenge would not be to ruin another man. My revenge would be to become the woman I would have been if I had never met him. The kind of woman who looks in the mirror and feels proud of what she sees. The woman I always was, but whom he made sure to hide, to silence, to diminish, word by word, look by look. For so long, years that now seem like a hazy eternity, I lived for his gaze. Everything I did, every decision I made, every piece of clothing I wore, every word I spoke was filtered through the silent question, what will he think? It was as if I had installed a permanent judge inside my head, and that judge had his voice, his tone of disapproval, that sigh of disappointment he let out when I didn't meet his expectations. Everything I did was so he would see me in a way he approved of, in a way he valued. But deep down, in that hidden place in the soul where truth stubbornly exists even when we try to smother it, I knew he was making me lose sight of who I really was. I was fading away little by little, like a photograph left in the sun, losing color, losing detail, losing definition. As if my essence was something that could be ignored, discarded, replaced by the version of me he preferred, a convenient, silent version that didn't bother him, didn't question him, that simply existed to serve. I remember one specific day, a few months before the end. I was in the kitchen preparing dinner, as I always did, and I heard my own voice talking to the children. For a moment, I didn't recognize that voice. It was low, hesitant, always apologizing. Sorry, son, Mom forgot. Sorry, love, Mom couldn't. When had I started apologizing for existing? When had my voice lost the firmness it had at 20, when I walked into a room and people listened? That night, after everyone was asleep, I stood in front of the bathroom mirror for almost an hour. I studied my face as if it belonged to a stranger. I searched for the Laura I knew, that girl with bright eyes who dreamed of changing the world, who laughed too loudly, who had opinions about everything. Where was she? At what moment had she accepted disappearing? It was there, in that cold August dawn, with the wind rattling the window and the house silent around me, that I made a decision. It wasn't dramatic. There was no background music or cinematic moment. It was just a whisper to my own reflection. Enough. My revenge, then, would not be a direct blow against him. It would not be drama. It would not be scandal. It would be something far more powerful, far more radical. It would be a reinvention of myself. I no longer needed his approval to be happy. That sentence seems simple when written, but living it is crossing an entire desert until you find the oasis. I no longer needed his words to feel complete. For years, a kind word from him was like water in the desert. I lived thirsty for a compliment, for a look of approval, for any crumb of affection he might throw my way. And when those crumbs didn't come, and they rarely did, I wondered what was wrong with me. I never questioned what was wrong with someone who treated his own wife as if she were invisible. I wanted to be the woman who could look in the mirror and feel proud of who she had become, regardless of the flaws, the scars life had given me, the stretch marks left by 3 pregnancies, the gray hairs starting to appear, the body that was no longer the same as in my 20s. That was my goal, and for that, I knew I would have to start slowly, with small acts of rebellion against the version of me he had constructed. I started with the small things. You know that walking routine he always said was useless because I would never lose weight? I started doing it. Yes, I started. Not because he said he couldn't. In fact, it was exactly because of that I started, to prove to myself, not to him, that I was capable. I bought sneakers. It may seem silly, but it was revolutionary. I walked into the sports store afraid the salesperson would judge me, afraid she'd think, is this woman really going to exercise? But the salesperson, a young woman with a genuine smile, treated me like any other customer. She showed me options, talked about comfort and support, and when I put on those blue and white sneakers, I felt something I hadn't felt in years: anticipation. The first day was awful. I woke up at 6 a.m. before Eduardo woke up because I didn't want to hear comments, put on an old sweatpants and a loose t-shirt, laced up my new sneakers, and went out. The street was empty, the city still waking up, and there I was, a 43-year-old woman who hadn't exercised in over a decade, about to walk. The first steps were ridiculous.
I felt clumsy, heavy, out of place. My body hurt in places I'd forgotten existed. My lungs burned after just 2 blocks. I thought about turning back at least 10 times in the first 15 minutes. But then something curious happened. I passed an elderly lady doing the same walk. She greeted me with a cheerful "Good morning," as if we were old friends, as if I had every right to be there, sweaty and panting. That simple good morning was like a little push. I kept going. On the second day, I went a little farther. On the third, I was less out of breath. On the fourth, Eduardo asked where I was going so early, and I simply answered, "Walking." He snorted, said something about me wasting time, but I was already at the door. I left and didn't look back. Walking became my sacred ritual. It wasn't about losing weight. Though my body was changing, getting stronger, firmer, it was about those 40 minutes every morning when I belonged only to myself. No one needed me, no one demanded anything, no one judged me. I was there, putting one foot in front of the other, breathing, existing. I started meeting the people in the neighborhood who also walked. Mr. Antonio, a 70-year-old man who had done the same route for 15 years. Mrs. Marisa, who walked while listening to old songs on her phone. Juliana, a woman my age who was also rebuilding her life after a difficult divorce. We didn't talk much, just nods, smiles, sometimes a comment about the weather. But there was a silent camaraderie among us. We were morning warriors, each fighting their own battles, each conquering their own territory, one step at a time. Every step became lighter. Every day, my body seemed to respond differently. It wasn't just the physical that was changing, but my mindset. I was no longer walking to please others or to fit someone else's beauty standards. I was walking for me, to feel the air in my lungs, to observe the colors of nature, and to give myself the chance to breathe deeply. I started noticing things I had never noticed before. The house on the corner had a spectacular yellow rose garden. The bakery up the street had the smell of fresh bread wafting out at 6:30 in the morning. There was a stray dog that always waited for me at the same gate, wagging his tail as if my passing was the best moment of his day. I decided to go back to school. That decision came one Sunday afternoon when I was flipping through an old magazine in the dentist waiting room. There was a feature about women who returned to school after 40, and each story pierced me like a needle. They were stories of new beginnings, of women who decided it wasn't too late, that life hadn't ended just because they were over 40. Eduardo always said I didn't need anything else, that my life was sorted out, and that I was wasting time on something that wouldn't make a difference. Why study now, Laura? You already have a house, a husband, children. What more do you want? As if my existence could be reduced to those things, as if I was nothing more than a wife and mother, as if my own dreams were unnecessary luxuries. He told me I already had everything a woman could want, and for years I believed it, or at least pretended to believe it. But that magazine, with those women smiling at their graduations, showed me a truth I had been avoiding. I wanted more. Not because what I had wasn't important. My children were and always would be my greatest joy, but because I was more than just a wife and mother. I was Laura, and Laura had dreams that had been shelved for so long they had gathered dust. The decision to go back to school wasn't easy. First came the fear. Am I still capable? Then the shame. I'll be the oldest in the class. Then the guilt. I'm being selfish. I should focus more on the family. It was astonishing how I had internalized his voice, how it was so present that I didn't even need him to say those things anymore. I said them to myself. But something had changed in those morning walks. I had proven to myself that I was capable of doing something hard, of persisting even when it was uncomfortable. If I could walk even when my body screamed to stop, why couldn't I study? I researched graduate programs in education, my original field, the one I had abandoned when I married and got pregnant. I found the perfect course, but it was expensive. I would have to use the savings I had been secretly setting aside for years. They were small savings, tucked away here and there, 20 reals from one purchase, 50 from another, kept in an account Eduardo didn't know about. It was my emergency money, my microscopic financial independence. When I made the enrollment, my hands were shaking so much that I entered the password wrong 3 times. But when I finally clicked confirm, I felt a rush of adrenaline I hadn't felt in decades. I was doing some things for me, not for my children, not for the house, not for the marriage, for me. The first day of class was a whirlwind of emotions. I woke up at 5 in the morning, even though the class was only at 7 in the evening. I changed clothes 5 times. Too formal, too casual, too young, too old. In the end, I chose a simple blouse and jeans, but I changed the accessories so many I lost count. Eduardo barely noticed when I said I had class that night. He was watching TV and just muttered something about having to fend for himself with dinner. The boys, already teenagers, were more excited. My oldest son, Rafael, 16, said, "That's cool, Mom, you'll be like my schoolmate." That made me smile inside the whole way to the university. The classroom was full when I arrived, and yes, I was one of the oldest, but I wasn't the only one. There were other women my age and even some older. There were also young recent graduates, full of energy and ideas. At first, I stayed quiet in my corner, observing, feeling like an imposter. But then the professor asked a question about early childhood education, about how to handle children in conflict situations. And I, who had raised 3 children, who had been a volunteer at their schools for years, who had navigated countless crises and conflicts, raised my hand. My heart was pounding, but I spoke. I shared an experience, gave my opinion, and people listened. They really listened, took notes, nodded in agreement. The professor said, "Excellent point, Laura." In that moment, something inside me ignited. It was the flame of relevance, of competence, of belonging. I wasn't invisible. I had value. My experience mattered. My ideas were valid. And my body? Oh, my body. For so long, I hid behind loose clothes, neutral colors, everything that could make me disappear. Eduardo had convinced me that my body was something shameful, something that needed to be hidden. He never said it directly. He was more sophisticated than that. But the comments were always there, disguised as quote-unquote concern. "Don't you think that dress is too tight? Maybe you should think about going on a diet for your heart, for your health. Your friend lost so much weight, don't you want to try too?" Each comment was a drop of poison, and little by little, those drops accumulated until I internalized the message. My body wasn't good enough. I wasn't good enough. But now, with the daily walks and the changes I saw in the mirror, not necessarily in size, but in posture, strength, vitality, something began to change. I started seeing my body not as an enemy to be tamed, but
I started saying no more. When the neighbor asked me to watch her kids for the 10th time that month, I said, "I can't this time. I have commitments." I didn't explain. I didn't justify. Just, I can't. When Eduardo asked me to skip a class to go with him to a work dinner, "You have to go. It'll look bad if I show up alone," I said, "I'm not skipping. If you need a companion, you can hire someone." He was furious, but I went to my class. At graduate school, I made friends. Real friends, not the superficial, how's the weather kind. There was Sylvia, a 50-year-old woman who had just divorced and was starting over. Camila, a 25-year-old who saw me as a mentor and always asked for advice. Marcos, a 60-year-old man who had been a school principal and had 1,000 fascinating stories. We started meeting to study. At first, it was just for assignments, but then it became tradition. Every Saturday morning, at a cafe near the university, we gathered. We talked about classes, yes, but also about life, dreams, fears. It was the kind of deep connection I hadn't had in years, maybe never had. Eduardo hated those meetings. "You're going out again? You spend more time with those strangers than with me." I used to feel guilty when he said that. I used to cancel my plans to stay home with him. But now I simply said, "Yes, I'm going. See you later." And I went. It was during one of those Saturdays, 3 months after I started the graduate program, that everything changed definitively. I was at the cafe, laughing at a joke Marcos had told, when my phone rang. It was an unknown number. I answered without thinking too much. "Hello?" A young, trembling female voice. "Is this Laura, Eduardo's wife?" My heart stopped. I knew. In that second, before she even spoke, I knew. "Yes, it's me." I'm so sorry. You need to know. Eduardo and we've been together for 6 months. He said he was going to tell you, but..." I should have been in shock. I should have been devastated, but a strange calm took over me. "How old are you?" 23. She was the age of the daughter I never had. I could have been her mother. "He promised he was going to leave home, that he was going to be with me, but he never does anything, and I can't stand being the other woman anymore, and..." "Breathe," I said, surprisingly calm. "Breathe. You want me to end it with him, is that it?" I just want him to choose. I love him." Love. She called that love. I had 20 more years of experience than her, so I knew that wasn't love. It was illusion, it was manipulation, it was a 48-year-old man who felt powerful seducing someone young enough to be impressed by him. "What's your name?" I asked. "Bianca." "Bianca, you can have him. But I guarantee you that in a few years, when you're my age, you'll be getting a call from another girl. Because men like Eduardo don't change. They just change victims." I hung up before she could respond. My friends were looking at me, worried. Sylvia held my hand. "Laura, what happened?" And then I laughed. I started laughing and couldn't stop. It wasn't hysterical laughter of despair. It was relief, pure and simple relief. "He's having an affair for 6 months." "My God, Laura, I'm so sorry." "No," I interrupted. "Don't be. I'm fine. I'm more than fine. I'm free." And it was true. In that moment, sitting in a cafe with my friends by my side, I realized that what I felt wasn't pain. It was liberation. It was as if someone had cut the chains I didn't even know I was wearing. When I got home, Eduardo was in the living room watching TV. Normal, ordinary, as if nothing had happened. "We need to talk," I said. He didn't even look. "Later, the game's starting." "Now." Something in my tone must have caught his attention because he finally looked at me. "What is it?" "Bianca called me." He went pale. For a second, just a second, I saw panic in his eyes. But then he composed himself.
And there was the mask I knew so well, anger as defense. That crazy woman, Laura, she's obsessed. No, I said, my voice firm. Don't try that. Don't try to manipulate me again. It's over. I want you to leave. Leave? This is my house. This is our house. And you can keep paying your share until the divorce is final, but you're not living here. Pack your things. You have until tomorrow. You've lost your mind? Because of some slut who called? She means nothing. Exactly, I said. She means nothing. I mean nothing. Nothing means anything to you except your ego. But you know what's funny, Eduardo? I finally mean something to myself, and that's more important than anything you can say or do. He tried to argue, tried to make me feel guilty, tried all the usual tactics, said I was overreacting, that all men have their weaknesses, that I was too cold, that I had let myself go, that it was partly my fault. And for the first time in years, I listened to him without internalizing a single word. It was like hearing someone speaking in a language I no longer understood. Those words no longer had power over me. Pack your things, I repeated, and I went upstairs to the bedroom. The following months were chaotic. Eduardo left the house. He went to live with Bianca, I found out later, but not without making a scene to anyone who would listen. According to him, I was the villain of the story, the cold wife who had thrown the poor husband out. Some acquaintances believed him. I let them believe. The people who mattered knew the truth, and those who didn't, well, their opinion was no longer my problem. The boys suffered, of course, especially Raphael, who was old enough to understand what was happening. He was angry with me at first. Why don't you try to work it out? Why don't you forgive Dad? I sat down with him one night and had one of the hardest conversations of my life. Son, forgiving doesn't mean taking someone back. I forgive your father for him, for who he is, for the mistakes he made. But that doesn't mean I have to stay with someone who hurts me repeatedly. And one day, when you have serious relationships, you'll understand that sometimes the most loving thing you can do for yourself is to walk away from someone who harms you. It took time, but he eventually understood. Beatrice and Lucas were younger, so it was a bit easier for them, though it still had its difficulties. The house felt emptier without Eduardo, but it also felt lighter. There was no tension in the air. There was no heavy silence that precedes a storm. It was just the four of us, building a new dynamic, a new family. I continued with graduate school. I continued with my walks. I started therapy, something Eduardo had always ridiculed. Why pay someone to listen to you complain? Therapy was revealing. Painful at times, but revealing. My therapist, Dr. Fernanda, helped me see patterns I didn't even know existed. How I always put others' needs before my own. How I had learned from childhood that my value lay in being useful, in being needed. How I confused love with sacrifice. Laura, she told me in one session, you spent so much time being what others needed that you forgot to ask what you need. It was an epiphany. What did I need? When was the last time I really asked myself that? I started making lists. Not shopping lists or to-do lists, but lists about myself. What makes me happy? Reading, walking, learning new things, laughing with my children, hot coffee on the porch in the morning, wind in my hair, old music, deep conversations. What do I want to achieve? Finish graduate school? Maybe do a master's? Travel more? Meet interesting people? Write more? What will I no longer accept in my life? Disrespect? Manipulation? Being invisible? 6 months after the separation, I was a different person. Not completely different. I was still me, but I was a truer, more authentic version of myself. I was the Laura who had always existed beneath all those layers of expectations and external approvals. I finished graduate school with distinction. At the graduation party, my children were there, proud, taking thousands of pictures. My friends from school were there too, cheering and clapping when they called my name. I went up on stage in my red dress. Yes, the same one. And when I received my diploma, I cried. I cried with joy, pride, relief. I had done it. I had proven to myself that I was capable. After graduation, opportunities started to appear. I was invited to give lectures on inclusive education, the topic of my final project. I started working as a consultant for schools, helping teachers develop more humane methodologies. It wasn't a steady job yet, but it was mine. It was something I had built with my own hands, my own mind. The money coming in wasn't much at first, but it was my money. Money I earned with my work, with my knowledge. And that had a value beyond the financial. It was dignity. It was independence. It was concrete proof that I had value in the market, in the world, beyond the walls of my home. I decided it was time to do something I had always dreamed of but never had the courage: travel alone with my children. Eduardo always controlled our trips: where we went, where we stayed, what we did. Everything had to be approved by him, passed through his filter. And in the end, the trips were always more about what he wanted to do. I saved money for 3 months and planned a trip to the beach. Not an expensive, fancy beach, but a small fishing village that a colleague had recommended. I booked a simple but charming inn, rented a car, and one Friday morning the 4 of us set off. The freedom of that trip was indescribable. We woke up when we wanted. We ate what we felt like. If we wanted to spend the whole day at the beach, we did. If we wanted to stay at the inn reading, we stayed. There was no one complaining, sighing, making everyone feel guilty for not enjoying it properly. One night, sitting on the sand with my children beside me, looking at the stars, Raphael said, "Mom, this is the best trip we've ever taken." And Beatrice added, "It's because we're really happy." That broke me and healed me at the same time. They had felt the tension all those years. They had noticed we weren't happy. And now, finally, we were building genuine memories of joy. We took more trips after that. We went to the mountains, visited historic towns, explored national parks. Each trip was an adventure, an opportunity to get to know each other better as a family, to laugh together, to create our own story. Another thing that changed was my social life. During the marriage, I had lost contact with many friends. Eduardo always had an excuse for me not to go out. "You're going to leave me alone again? Those friends of yours are a bad influence. Don't you think you should stay home more with the boys?" Little by little, I had isolated myself. My friends stopped inviting me, and I stopped suggesting meetings. It was easier that way, avoiding conflicts, avoiding having to explain why I couldn't go. But now I started reconnecting. I called Patricia, my best friend from college, with whom I hadn't spoken in 4 years. It was awkward at first, so much had changed.
But she was amazing. Laura, I always knew something was wrong. I was just waiting for you to be ready to come back. We arranged a lunch. Talking to her was like going back in time, but in a good way. We reminisced about old stories, laughed at silly things, but we also talked about serious things. I told her everything: the marriage, the emotional abuse, the separation, the rebuilding. She listened without judgment, just supporting. "You know what I've always admired about you?" she said. "Your strength. Even when you were at rock bottom, you never completely gave up. And look at you now. You're incredible, Laura." That made me realize something important. The people who truly love us never stop loving us. They may step back for a while, respecting our space, but true love waits. And when we come back, it's still there. I reconnected with other friends too. We formed a group, started meeting once a month. We called it our Wine and Truths Club. We gathered at someone's house, brought wine, snacks, and talked about everything. About children, work, relationships, dreams, fears. It was therapeutic in a way no individual therapy could be, because it was genuine human connection. My relationship with my body continued to evolve. The daily walks turned into something more. I started doing yoga, something I had always wanted to try, but Eduardo thought was hippie stuff. I found a small studio near home and signed up for a beginner's class. The first class was humiliating. I was the stiffest in the group, could barely touch my toes, and my balance was terrible. But the instructor, Marina, was patient and kind. "Yoga isn't about competition," she said. "It's about honoring where your body is today." That phrase stayed with me, honoring where my body is today. Not punishing my body for what it isn't, but honoring it for what it is, for what it can do. I started going 3 times a week. Little by little, my body opened up, became more flexible, stronger. But more important than the physical changes were the mental ones. Yoga taught me to breathe through discomfort, to find calm in the midst of chaos, to be present in the moment. I also changed my relationship with food. For years, food had been either an enemy or a reward. Either I was on a strict diet, usually after some comment from Eduardo, or I was drowning in food as emotional comfort. But now I was learning to eat mindfully, with pleasure, without guilt. I started cooking more, not out of obligation, but for pleasure. I tried new recipes, explored different flavors. Cooking became creative, no longer a heavy domestic chore. And when I ate, I really savored, paid attention, appreciated. My body changed, yes. I lost weight, gained muscle, my posture improved. But more important than all that, I
I made peace with my body. I looked in the mirror and saw not imperfections to be corrected, but a life story written on my skin. I saw strength, resilience, a kind of beauty that goes beyond the superficial. The divorce was difficult financially. Eduardo tried to complicate everything, of course. He questioned every number, every request, every right. But I had an excellent lawyer, Dr. Helena, a woman who didn't take any nonsense. She'll try to intimidate you, she warned me in the first consultation. She'll try to make you accept less than you deserve. But you need to be firm. You contributed to this marriage. You deserve your share. And I was firm. For the first time in my life, I fought for what was mine. I didn't accept the ridiculous offers he made. I didn't let myself be intimidated by his threats. I had a right to half of everything, and that's what I was going to get. The process took 8 months. 8 months of hearings, paperwork, stress. But in the end, it was worth it. I got a fair division of assets. The house stayed with me, or rather with the boys. Eduardo had to pay child support, and he paid, even if always late and with complaints. But the most important thing was that I was learning to manage financially. I started understanding investments, financial planning, how to make my money work. Things that Eduardo had always insisted on controlling alone, saying I didn't have a head for numbers. I discovered that yes, I did have a head for numbers. And more than that, I discovered that I enjoyed understanding finance, how to build security for myself and my children. I took online courses, read books, consulted experts. My financial independence was a crucial piece of my overall independence. I wasn't looking for romance. I swear I wasn't. After Eduardo, the last thing I wanted was another relationship. I was happy alone, discovering who I was, building my life. Romance was the last thing on my mind. But then I met Daniel. It was at an education event, a conference where I was presenting a workshop. He was a university professor, a specialist in pedagogy, and he was in the audience. After my presentation, he came to talk to me. "Your approach to emotional education is fascinating," he said. "Have you ever thought about publishing on this?" We talked for an hour about education, methodologies, the challenges of the Brazilian educational system. It was an intellectual, stimulating, respectful conversation. He listened to my ideas with genuine interest, asked intelligent questions, challenged my viewpoints in a constructive way. When we said goodbye, he asked for my professional contact, not my personal number, but my professional email. "I'd like to invite you to collaborate on a research project I'm developing," he explained. We started exchanging emails about the project. Then came work meetings. And at some point, I don't know exactly when, the conversation started going beyond professional. We discovered we had similar tastes in music, literature, cinema. We shared similar values about education, family, life. He invited me for coffee, not a work coffee, but a real coffee, a date. I said yes, but I was nervous. Nervous because I liked him, and that scared me. I was afraid of losing myself again, of falling into the trap of living for someone else. But Daniel was different. He didn't try to control me, didn't try to diminish me. He admired my independence, celebrated my achievements, respected my boundaries. When I said I wanted to take it slow, he said, "Of course, there's no rush. I just want to get to know you better." We took it slow, very slow. It took 3 months for our first kiss, 6 months to introduce him to my children, and almost a year for me to feel comfortable saying we were dating. But it was a different kind of relationship. It wasn't codependency, it was partnership. We had separate lives, our work, our friends, our interests, and we chose to share parts of them with each other. Not because we needed to, but because we wanted to. Daniel never tried to change me. When I wore the red dress, he said, "You look beautiful." When I wanted to spend the weekend with my friends, he said, "Have fun." When I had a different opinion from his, he discussed, debated, but always respected. That was how it should have been from the beginning, I realized. A relationship wasn't about losing yourself in the other person. It was about two complete individuals choosing to walk together. It was on a Tuesday afternoon, 6 months after Daniel and I started dating, that my phone rang. It was him. Eduardo. I almost didn't answer, but something made me answer. Maybe curiosity, maybe the certainty that I was strong enough to hear whatever he had to say. "Laura?" His voice was different, lower, without the usual arrogance. "Hi, Eduardo, what do you want?" I need to talk to you. In person, it's important." Part of me wanted to hang up right then, but another part, the part of me that had grown and matured over those 2 years, was curious. About what? About us, about... I wanted to apologize. I almost laughed. Apologize? "Please, Laura, just give me a chance to talk. Half an hour. Can I come over?" Against my better judgment, I agreed. Half an hour. The boys aren't home, so you can come now. He arrived 20 minutes later. When I opened the door, I almost didn't recognize him. He was thinner, with deep dark circles, grayer hair. He looked smaller somehow, less imposing. "Come in," I said, keeping my voice neutral. We sat in the living room, the same living room where we had had so many arguments, where he had diminished me so many times. But now it was my territory. I was in control. So, I asked, what do you want to tell me? He took a deep breath. Laura, I ruined everything. Bianca, she wasn't what I thought. She was just a girl interested in my money. She used me, spent everything I had, and when it ran out, she traded me for a younger, richer guy. I waited. I said nothing. There was nothing to say. And I realized, you were the best thing I had. You took care of me, the house, the boys. You were a good wife, and I didn't know how to value you. I miss our family, Laura. I miss you. He looked at me with those eyes that once made me melt, but now I could see through them. I saw the manipulation, the attempt to appeal to my empathy, my historical desire to please. You know what I've always admired about you, she said. Your strength. Even when you were at rock bottom, you never completely gave up. And look at you now. You're incredible, Laura. That made me realize something important. The people who truly love us never stop loving us. They may step back for a while, respecting our space, but true love waits. And when we come back, it's still there. I reconnected with other friends too. We formed a group, started meeting once a month. We called it our Wine and Truths Club. We gathered at someone's house, brought wine, snacks, and talked about everything. About children, work, relationships, dreams, fears. It was therapeutic in a way no individual therapy could be, because it was genuine human connection. My relationship with my body continued to evolve. The daily walks turned into something more. I started doing yoga, something I had always wanted to try, but Eduardo thought was hippie stuff. I found a small studio near home and signed up for a beginner's class. The first class was humiliating. I was the stiffest in the group, could barely touch my toes, and my balance was terrible. But the instructor, Marina, was patient and kind. Yoga isn't about competition, she said. It's about honoring where your body is today. That phrase stayed with me, honoring where my body is today. Not punishing my body for what it isn't, but honoring it for what it is, for what it can do. I started going 3 times a week. Little by little, my body opened up, became more flexible, stronger. But more important than the physical changes were the mental ones. Yoga taught me to breathe through discomfort, to find calm in the midst of chaos, to be present in the moment. I also changed my relationship with food. For years, food had been either an enemy or a reward. Either I was on a strict diet, usually after some comment from Eduardo, or I was drowning in food as emotional comfort. But now I was learning to eat mindfully, with pleasure, without guilt. I started cooking more, not out of obligation, but for pleasure. I tried new recipes, explored different flavors. Cooking became creative, no longer a heavy domestic chore. And when I ate,